Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Cynthia at Mountain Accents, and today we are talking about this or that sewing edition. I've been watching a lot of other YouTubers do a this or that sewing edition video, and I've enjoyed watching those. And so I reached out to Agata at Agata's Cottage and asked her where she found the questions, because I was not familiar with the sewists that began this. I don't know if you really call it a challenge, but she began this little question and answer session that, and her name is Julie at the Curated Curvy, and she got the idea from the Love to Sew podcast, episode 235. So I've got my laptop beside me with the questions pulled up. And so I am going to participate in this video shortly. First, I want to take a moment to thank all my new subscribers. I have gained a few this past month, and I appreciate all of you for subscribing. And if there is anyone else out there who has watched my videos but hasn't subscribed yet, it is completely free to sign up with YouTube and subscribe to a channel. And it does help me though. And I appreciate all of you that do subscribe, those who like and those who comment. And so now let's get into the Q&A. And I'm going to put my laptop in my lap so that I can see the questions, glance down. So the first question, or first topic, is sewing prep. And the first question for that is shopping new or stash busting. So I do not have a huge stash. I am starting to accumulate a stash, but I prefer to shop new. And most of the time when I'm purchasing fabric new, I already have an idea of what I'm going to make. However, I also subscribe to the Beyond the Pink Doors Think Pink subscription box, because I also like the surprise and the challenge that it gives me to sometimes sew something that is out of my comfort zone or challenges me. Currently I'm working on a dress from the last Think Pink box that is from viscose jersey, and I have never made a dress with viscose jersey, and so it is challenging me a little bit, but I am having fun doing so. So hopefully I will have that to share later. But yes, I like to shop new for fabric, and of course I do use my stash for mostly for things that I've already had ideas for, but I go back to it because I don't always get around to making them at the time that I have the idea. Next question is PDF patterns versus paper patterns. I prefer paper patterns, and mainly because I like the packaging, and I used to always cut my paper patterns, but I find that just like ready to wear clothing, I'm not always a perfect size. I'm kind of in between sizes. So I have, I guess, recently started using more PDF patterns or tracing my paper pattern instead of cutting into it, just so that I would still have it in case I need to make a different size or if I need to make adjustments. But I still like the idea of having a paper pattern, yeah, in hand. And I hate sticking together PDF patterns, even though I will, but I hate it. Okay, so that comes to the next question, cutting versus tracing. I still prefer to cut. I absolutely hate tracing, but I will trace. And I have been tracing more than I would like to. So, yeah, as far as liking, I prefer cutting, but as necessity sometimes dictates tracing. And then the next one is muslin or just go for it. And I have to say, I just go for it. I do not, I don't like the idea of sewing a muslin, even though I have thought about doing muslins, and then I always talk myself out of it, because part of what I like about sewing is trying something new. And sometimes with certain patterns, I find that once I make it the one time, I get bored with it and I'm ready to move on to something else. Now, I have got a few patterns like the True by Slander pants. I have made those more than one time. The Atelier Jupe Tilda shirt dress, I've made it a couple of times. I have also made, I've made a Lynn caftan dress, Atelier Jupe Lynn caftan dress, and then I'm wearing a Atelier Jupe Lynn caftan blouse. So there are certain patterns that I like well enough that I'm willing to try them again, but most of the time when I'm sewing, I get bored by the time I finish the project, I'm ready to try something different. So I just go for it. And I'm going to get a sip of my coffee. I've been cleaning the house today, and I've mailed off my project dress, a girl dress. I've made one dress this year. It's my first time participating in that, and so I wanted to be sure I got it in the mail so it could get delivered to Mari at Mari Sews for Kerrs in time. So that's got in the mail today. And I've decided to take a break from housework to film this video. So we're moving on to topic number 2, which is all about fabric. And the first question is, do we purchase in-store or online shopping? I definitely like online shopping for a couple of reasons, or maybe more than a couple, but primarily you may hear my dog eating. Anytime she has an audience, she likes to eat, and you can hear her tag jingling against the side of her pan. So anyway, in the stores that are, I don't have any stores that are real close to me, but the stores that I have visited that carries fabric, a lot of them are like quilting cottons, or I can drive a good distance to Hobby Lobby or Joann's, and I have purchased fabric there, but I just don't do well shopping in the store. I like to be able to go to an online shop. They give you a lot more details about what the fabric content is, about the care instructions. Sometimes it gives even pattern recommendations, and I just like that. And then sometimes too, when I find like fabric online and I'm thinking about a project, I'm not 100% sure, but I really like the fabric, I will bookmark it and think about it and then go back to it and then buy it. Most of the time when I buy it, I have an idea in mind what I want to make, or at least, like, if I don't know the specific pattern, I know whether I want to make a blouse or a dress, or shorts or pants, whatever. So online shopping. Second one is knits versus wovens, and that's a toss-up because I like doing both. When I first started sewing, I would have said wovens because I was terrified of sewing knits. But once I invested in buying a serger or overlocker, I found that I didn't mind. I enjoy sewing knits. And then once they came out with Mariflex thread and Seriflex thread, that too made knits more enjoyable, and you don't have to worry about the fit quite so much with knits. So yeah, I like doing both, and yeah. And the next one is tumble dry versus hang to dry, and this is another one of those that for the most part I tumble dry. However, when I do hang to dry certain garments, and it's based on what the garment is, the fabric type. Even when I was buying ready to wear clothing, I would hang to dry certain items based on the fabric content or what type of clothing item it was. If it was like a really dressy item, or made out like a viscose or rayon, I would usually line dry those. I line dry or hang to dry my linen, and I don't have a lot of space for drying fabric indoors, and don't always line dry outside, but this summer when it was really hot, I did hang fabric outside to dry because it did dry quicker outside versus inside. And so I guess I tumble dry more than I line dry, but I do like to hang to dry certain items. Next one is rotary cutters versus scissors, and I prefer scissors. I do use a rotary cutter sometimes, but my mat is not very large, so I have to, sometimes I'll have to shift it. And now if I had I don't have a designated sewing room. If I had a designated sewing room where I had a table that I have like with solid mats, then I'd be maybe more apt to use a rotary cutter. But as it is, I usually use my dining room table for cutting fabric, or one of the hardwood floors in the house has, in one of the rooms, is large enough that I can lay fabric on and cut in there, and I use scissors primarily. And then, like, back not having a sewing room, so I have to, my sewing machines are in my bedroom, but my serger is in another room. And then usually when I set up my ironing board, I set it up in my bedroom when I'm sewing. So I'm having to get up and move around when I'm sewing and doing different sections anyway. So we'll get more to that in the next little bit. So yes, so we're moving on to topic number 3, which is clothing construction. It says follow the pattern or wing it for number 1. And I tend to follow the pattern because I'm relatively new sewist, but I have enjoyed tackling more complicated patterns that are not necessarily beginner patterns. And the only time that, well, I wouldn't say I ever wing it, but there's been times where I haven't understood the instructions or I couldn't wrap my mind around it, and I would maybe go to another YouTuber or look for a post about certain ways to construct things, just if I understood it better. And so I would still, maybe not necessarily follow the specific patterns instructions, but I would follow someone else's instructions on how to construct things. So I'm not comfortable enough just to wing it. Number 2 is bias tape finish or versus facings. Well, that's tricky because I don't like either one. I guess, though, I feel like I do a better job with facings. And I have done the bias tape finishes, but I'm always nervous that I'm going to mess it up when I do a bias tape finish. Whereas I'm more comfortable and feel comfortable enough with the facing that I feel like I'm not going to mess it up. But I'm always holding my breath when I do the bias tape finish. So I don't know, yeah. That was a tough one. Okay, number 3 is serge seams versus French seams. I mostly do serge seams. I do like a French seam. And there's certain patterns where I feel like a French seam does very well. Like I've used it on the Friday Pattern Company Wilder gown, but I've also made the Wilder gown pattern with serge seams. And I guess it would also depend on, like, I know if it's a lighter fabric that's more see-through, that I might be more tempted to do a French seam. But for the most part, it's serge seams for me. And then number 4 is button fly versus zip fly. And I may be one of the few people that actually, I really like a button fly. And I know, like, I've already mentioned the True Bias Slender Pants is one of my favorite patterns, and it has a button fly, and I really like that button fly. I don't mind doing buttons. My machine does have, one of my machines has button fly, but computerized button fly or buttonhole things. That it works really well. My other machine has the function, but it doesn't start and stop on its own. And I can make them on that and do a fairly good job, but I have a hard time knowing when to stop. Yeah, so yeah, I like button fly. I like a zip fly too, but the other pattern that I really like that has a button fly is the Closet Core Morgan jeans. I've made a pair of those, and I'd like to make another pair because I did make them out of just a cotton twill fabric, and it's kind of a pale green color, and it was kind of like my trial to see how they did, and I really like the way they fit. They're little, I made them to where they're a little snugger when I first put them on, but by the later in the day, when they give a little bit of stretch and give to them as the day goes on, they're like super comfortable. And next question is button by hand or machine sewn buttons. And even though my sewing machine has that function, and I have the foot that does the machine sewn buttons, I have never used it. I always sew my buttons by hand. I can't say that I love sewing buttons by hand, but I feel very secure in knowing that they're well sewn when I put them in by hand, and that they're not going to come off. And yeah, sometimes I don't mind it. It's kind of enjoyable and relaxing, but then other times when I'm anxious to get a dress done or a pattern done, I want the buttons on really quick, then I get impatient with myself, but I still take the time to sew them on by hand. Okay, number 6 is fusible interfacing versus sewn-in interfacing. I have never used sewn-in interfacing. I prefer fusible interfacing, and I have to say that some of it is better than others, because sometimes I've gotten a hold of some fusible interfacing that just doesn't stick like it should. But yeah, I go fusible. Snip as you go or all at once. I snip as I go. I cannot stand to have the loose threads hanging out. And even though my new machine has the little cutter, sometimes it has just a little short length, and I still snip those too. So I definitely like to snip as I go and keep it nice and clean. And then that leads me on to press as you go or all at once. And I also press as I go. Now, this one is something I think I learned maybe the hard way, because I think when I was relatively new to sewing, I was thinking, I was a little bit lazier, and I found that the finished garment didn't look as well when I didn't press as I went. So I definitely press as I go now, and I take more time also with pressing certain seams. Like there are certain seams that does better with, like the drawing a blank on what it's called, the hem. I use a hem to sometimes to get around those curves, you know. So but I like to press as I go. Okay, so then the last topic is sewing habits. It says late night seamstress versus daytime seamstress. So I prefer daytime sewing. I like doing everything in the daytime. Of a nighttime, that's when I want to relax. I want to watch YouTube. I want to read. I want to relax. So during the daytime, if I'm going to get something done, it's got to be done during the daytime hours. And that's work, housework, working on the job, cooking, cleaning, sewing, whatever it is, I got to get done during the daytime. And next one is slow and steady versus frantic sewing. So I am a slow sewer, so I'm slow and steady. I try not to set myself deadlines unless I know I set it out weeks out. I am working on a quilt. I'm not a quilter, but I am working on a quilt for my son, and I have set myself a deadline to have it done by Christmas. So hold me to it. We'll see if it gets done. He's counting on it. He probably won't care if I don't, but he'll be very excited if I do get it done by Christmas. So yeah, but most of my sewing is garment sewing, and I don't rush it. I take my time, even if it's like sewing 15 minutes at a time and doing maybe Like the dress I'm working on right now, I've got my shoulder seams attached. That's it. And then my next goal is I'm trying to get the collar in, even if that's all I get done that day. So yeah, I do a slow sewing. And then the last one is tidy as you go versus one big cleaning session. So back to the not having a designated sewing room, and my sewing stuff is spread out between 2 rooms basically. But if you count my cutting out area in the dining room as a 3rd area, then I tidy as I go because I have to. And after each sewing session, I tidy because I don't have that designated space. Now, if I did have a designated space, I think I might be a little bit more tempted to leave what I'm working on out and maybe not tidy as much, but I would still tidy because I like to throw my little scrap pieces of practice sewing or loose thread stuff clipped or whatever. I like to throw those away as I go. And so that wraps it up for this or that. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope if you liked what you've seen that you'll click like. If you haven't subscribed and you've watched my channel, watch this, please subscribe. Check out some of my other videos. I've got several out there. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.